Thanks for joining us. My name is Cliff Steinhauer. I'm the Director of Information Security and Engagement here at the National Cybersecurity Alliance. Most of you are probably familiar with us if you found us, but we're, of course, the premier nonprofit for cyber education for the public, fostering public-private partnerships, and just making sure that we're able to keep all of our colleagues, friends, and family safe while we use our online services. So joining me today, we have our Convene silver sponsor, Hoxhunt. And from Convene, we have Eliot Baker and we have Maxime Cartier. So Maxime is the head of human risk at Hoxhunt, and Eliot is the director of content. And so today they're going to be talking about their 2025 Phishing Trends, Insights, and Benchmarks report as a healthy follow-up to their presentation that they just gave gosh, was that only last week at Convene? So I'd love to see in the chat, any of you that were at Convene, just raise your hand, call yourself out. It was a fantastic event. We started this webinar series to kind of continue those conversations. And so we're happy today to welcome Hoxhunt, and I will go ahead and kick it off to you guys, Eliot and Maxime, if you want to go ahead and start sharing your screen and giving us what we can expect today.
All right, thanks for the warm welcome there, Cliff. Good to see you again. And I will start sharing my screen, and I'll let Maxime introduce himself as well.
Hey everyone, super happy to be here. I'm Maxime Cartier. I'm the head of human risk management at Hoxhunt. Long time working in security awareness, behavior, and culture change for global companies, and co-author of the report with Eliot.
All right, great to see you again as well, Maxime. So I am Eliot Baker, originally from Seattle, but I'm located in Helsinki, Finland for several years now. And I am super excited to bring to you this year's 2025 Phishing Trends report, because we have gone really deep into the data, and we've kind of found some new ground to break here. So let's go ahead and get started. So today, what we'll be looking at is cybersecurity research that is hot off the presses. And we'll be covering the results of a major study into the actual incidence of phishing and into human cyber behavior. And we'll make sure to give you insights that you can use in your own security awareness and phishing training program. The webinar will be recorded, and we'll share these slides with you. I think Cliff can handle all this. That's me. We've been introduced. That's Maxime, also introduced. And this is the report that this information is from, and we'll be sharing with this with you later. And we will be looking at the threat landscape trends and updated phishing costs. There's actually hot off the presses updated phishing costs from the Ponemon Institute's much anticipated 2025 Insider Risk Report, cost of insider risk reports. That'll be kind of neat. And we'll be looking at the AI and phishing incidents and the impact of training. So let's just sort of start here, and we'll touch on the burning topics of today, including AI for both white hat and black hat applications, and multi-channel phishing attacks like mobile phishing. But we'll start with how this report is breaking new ground by providing the first reference point for the global incidence of real malicious clicks and the actual phishing attacks that bypass filters. So this fills a critical gap in the cybersecurity literature, which mostly talks about the phishing attacks that get caught in email filters. We're drilling into the human layer of phishing data beneath the email filters to help answer who's clicking on what and ultimately why. So this report reveals an escalation in phishing attacks that evade email filters and land in inboxes. It examines how many of these email filter evading attacks are written by AI. That, to my knowledge, has not really been done before. This is an initial reference point for the effect of AI on the actual incidence of phishing attacks that have been written by AI. This report is from over 50 million data points were collected from the real and simulated threat reports of over 2.5 million threat hunters from around the world. So, Maxime, let me turn it over to you a second. just maybe explain to the audience on a general level, like why is this important in your perspective as a security awareness manager and a director of human risk?
Certainly, I think what's important or what's interesting in this report is that we're looking at the attacks that people are actually going to be facing. So data from email filters is interesting, it's great, but we're happy if the threads get blocked. And it's not so actionable for us security awareness managers to know which threads are getting blocked. We want to know which threads are not getting blocked, are getting into people's inboxes, the attacks that people are going to face, so that we can create perhaps targeted simulations, targeted training, or other targeted interventions to reduce real risk.
Very well said. So we're going to kind of start with a look ahead at the conclusions of this report. But I think it's a good starting point because this is where new ground is being broken. So by connecting robust data on both simulated and real phishing attack threat reports, we can give an estimate on how many phishing attacks bypass filters per year per organization per their industry and size. So we use 1,000 employees as the benchmark. And there are about 2,330 malicious emails that bypass filters per year in a 1,000 person organization. And we know that by extrapolating the simulated click rates from the training, that with a standard failure rate for a quarterly SAT tool-driven program, which is about 20%, maybe a little bit less, 15%, usually around 20% or more though, there are going to be about 466 malicious clicks per year from those 2,330 fish. So to be clear, not all of those are breaches, but it's still a bit of a headache for the SOC, for the SOC to deal with all of those malicious clicks. That number of malicious clicks shrinks from 466 per year to just about 75 per year with the successful adaptive phishing and behavior change program, which in our case is obviously Hoxhunt. Maxime, any thoughts?
Yeah, the difference between 466 clicked fish and 75 malicious clicks per year, I think it's not just a statistic. We need to place that back into context, and it's a massive reduction in workload for the SOC, first, the Security Operations Center, and obviously a significant improvement in the organizations, in the organizational resilience. So this really reinforces what I've seen in security culture programs, that when we make training relevant, engaging, and continuous, employees don't just avoid phishing, they actively defend against it and become a force multiplier for the SOC.
Well said. Your people are your force multipliers. Okay. So phishing, AI, and multi-channel attacks, oh my. Sounds scary. I know that a lot of reports really dwell on kind of the scary numbers, but I promise that this is not another report that wallows in fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And actually, the story does have a happy ending. People can be trained to stay secure even against AI-enabled attacks. So, taking a look at the most recent prestigious reports examination of the landscape, we have 68% of breaches contain the human element. There's actually a funny thing about that. The year before, it was 74%. This is from the Verizon DBIR. That number actually would have stayed the same from last year to this year, except that they changed their criteria for analysis. But still, the generally recognized benchmark is 68%. 80 to 95% of cyber attacks begin with a phish. That is a finding from the Comcast Business Cybersecurity Threat Report, and they analyzed billions of data points to come to that number. The average cost of a phishing breach, according to the IBM and Ponemon Institute's Cost of a Data Breach report, is $4.88 million. That is the highest cost of any kind of data breach that IBM and Ponemon examined. And just an FYI, if you look at that report, it's a great report. There are also very high cost data breaches that are associated with things that are like phishing, social engineering, for instance, which is something like 4.7 million. And since the advent of ChatGPT in November 2022, SlashNext reports that there's been a 4,151% increase in cyber attacks, in phishing attacks. And those are the ones that get caught at the email filter. From here, we also need to acknowledge the emergence of mobile attacks. So mobile phishing is really surging. The data you see on your screen here now, that's Hoxhunt data that I'll let Maxime talk to. And we are working hard on getting some real smishing and vishing data ourselves. But just this user behavior data is going to be pretty illuminating, as you'll see. Just to kind of give some context to this, according to the recently released Global Mobile Threat Report by Zimperium, more than half of organizations in a recent study experienced a data breach due to employees' inappropriate access to sensitive and confidential information on their mobile devices. And this was pretty wild. 83% of phishing sites specifically targeted mobile devices. And so mobile targeted email phishing is increasingly becoming increasingly prevalent, with attacks specifically designed to evade desktop security measures, and they execute only on mobile devices. And this is really interesting. 3% of phishing sites use device-specific detection to display harmless content on desktops while delivering malicious phishing payloads exclusively to mobile users. So we can see like where the danger is surging from the threat landscape. I'll turn this over to Maxime to just say a little bit about like what these numbers here about user behavior and maybe why that might be one of the magnets to the threat actors.
Yeah, I mean, first to go back about the statistics on the left side of the screen, our data indicates that users can be anywhere from 4 times to 8 times more likely to fall for phishing on a smartphone compared to a desktop or a laptop. That's huge. That's what we see from all of our data, the 2.5 million users that we have and the millions, if not billions, of simulations that we've sent so far. And my interpretation is that we tend to use our phones while we do something else, not being fully focused on the phone. So that can be one of the reasons why we're not as cautious about these emails when we read them on our phones. We also might check them outside of business hours or on the move when we're more tired and less vigilant. You know, maybe you're at the security at the airport and you want to check this email and that link really quickly, or you're at home and the kids are crying and you also see this urgent notification at the same time and don't take the time to question it. And finally, on mobile phone, it's such a smaller screen, so it's harder to look for red flags, such as the email address of the sender or what the link is before clicking on it. So I think that's something that we need to be aware of and to address as security awareness managers. And in an organization, I check who are the mobile first or mobile heavy users in the organization and target them with either specific training or give them specific security solutions to help protect them.
Yeah, absolutely. As the threat landscape changes its dynamics to include mobile phones, we have to really make sure that our vigilance continues to the mobile phone. So the surge supports other reports on as much as a 4,150% rise in phishing attacks at the email filter. And by the surge, I'm talking about real phishing attacks that bypass email filters have gone up by about 49%, according to our data at Hoxhunt, since the end of 2021 and around the 2022 advent of ChatGPT. So 49% is a much different number than 4,151%. That being said, we're still like looking at this data. It might be even more than this. This is a very conservative estimate. We do want to make sure that we have like very responsible reporting of what we're seeing, but there's a bit of a difference between what's at the filter and what's getting through the filter. Maxime, why would you say that is such a difference there?
I mean, we see this quite frequently where there's a big bit of a tug of war between the attacks and our defenses. So our defenses are getting better. And so even though there's a lot more phishing emails being sent, there's also a lot more being stopped. But new tactics can just become, there's new tactics arriving, happening every day that are better at evading those filters, like QR code phishing, for example. We saw exactly that in late 2023. QR code phishing, they were all of a sudden, they represented 60% of all the emails that were reported to us were QR code phishing attacks. And then the email gateways, they caught up and they blocked attacks of that type. And so today they're a bit less common. But it looks like the filters have been doing a good job in 2024. There's still an increase, but it's not a huge one. Or I don't know, maybe attackers have been less inventive. It's hard to interpret it further, but just be aware that this can change at any time whenever there's a new creative technique that is found and used.
Yeah. Yeah, great points. Absolutely. And it really can change at any time. In a way, we might be looking at kind of the calm before a storm. And we'll get into that now at this next look at the AI written fish that actually bypass filters. So 0.7 to 4.7 of fish were determined to be written by AI. That was off analysis of over 300, almost 400,000 phishing attacks that bypass filters and were analyzed by some tools designed to determine whether it was AI or not. This is a very conservative estimate, by the way. The reports, the other most recent report by Mimecast put this figure up at about 12%. Even so, it might be a little surprising to some people that this isn't like 100% already, or that's exaggeration, but like why isn't it 20, 30, 40? And I think part of that is that it goes back to like what the guru of innovation and disruptive innovation, Clayton Christensen, always said: disruption happens gradually and then all at once. And you have to remember is that phishing and social engineering is an industry, and that industry has a certain kind of way of doing things. And people work within that industry using tools that are cheap, that deliver the best ROI they can find. So my hunch, and I'm going to have Maxime talk to this, is that probably the industry itself of cybercrime as a service has not yet massively adopted AI tools to its maximum effect. But Maxime, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, it seems like it. When we've done this research, we've analyzed about 400,000 malicious phishing emails that landed in employee inboxes during 2024. And yeah, the number of emails that we found written by AI, it seems quite small. We've used the latest at the time, at least when we created the report, because the technology is evolving so fast. But at the time when we created the report, we used the latest research to analyze that. But for now, as you said, Eliot, it appears that the cheap, well-established phishing kits that have long been on the dark web remained more popular. But AI is developing rapidly. AI-powered phishing kits will become more popular and accessible. So this trend can change drastically by next year. What we see already now, and that I think is worth mentioning, is deepfakes. Not strictly via email phishing, it can be via voice phishing, Teams, Zoom, starting with a WhatsApp message, a deepfake of the CEO or the CFO, for example. Basically, every single organization I've talked to in the past year told me that they've seen that. It's not just in the news, they've seen it happen in their organization. So it's definitely something that, well, we don't have numbers for it in the report, that we see is already happening today. And so we need to help our workforces to be more aware about this problem next year. And actually, the NCA is having their AI Fools campaign at the beginning of April, addressing this exact risk and trend.
Yeah, definitely. Just to chime in, I've been reading research on this as well, and I think the hot topic is AI, right? Like and deepfakes, we're all looking at this as this kind of novel attack vector and making these more believable. But the truth is the old tried and true phishing email still works. And it works enough that it's not pushing the threat actors to quickly adopt these other AI methods because if it's not broken, why fix it, right? Like they're still having success with these basic older tactics. So it's a good reminder that we still have to educate and train folks on the basics and on what a phishing email looks like and the red flags to look for and things, while also starting to acknowledge that once they have that basic understanding, that it's actually going to get much harder really, really quickly as the threat actors do start to adopt these AI tools.
Yeah,
Excellent.
absolutely. Yeah, thanks for that, Cliff. Those are really great points. And when you do see the phishing attacks that are advanced and sophisticated, that have elements of an AI being not just writing them, and so they're better written, obviously they look better, but they can have multiple steps in the attack chain. It really gets spooky, and you're talking to bots that seem just like someone who either a human being, like a service person, or even someone they can actually really mimic an actual person. So it's the future, is not going to be so easy. Okay. So just a couple looks at what the malicious actors are looking to do when they do attack us. So not all malicious clicks by employees target company data. Sometimes it's an attack targeted at the employee's personal data or money. And over the last 6 months of 2024, the proportion of phishing attacks targets varied between personal and organizational assets. And reasons for the variation are unclear, though there was a summer uptick in personal campaigns, and that might kind of indicate that threat actors are adjusting to the summer vacation season. But what we saw was that 2/3 of attacks target organizational assets. So you get phished. The point of what the attacker is trying to do when they get you to click something or fill out a credential harvesting site is to get access to the organization. And the other ones are, obviously to get access to your information, to your bank accounts. And so typically these cyber threats are credential harvesters and fraudulent invoices. And common themes include postal service or financial institution impersonation. And yeah, I was going to say something, I'll save it for later because that'll come up. So malicious attachment campaigns. So according to the Verizon 2024 Verizon DBIR, 94% of malware is delivered through email attachments. Malicious messages with attachments may contain a malware payload in the initial attachment or a credential harvester, or more likely, lead users to the next step in a scam where the ultimate payload might be a credential harvesting site, malware, complex phishing scam with further social engineering across multiple channels, maybe including a phone call or video conference with an imposter, or a ruse to dupe people into handing over their MFA. So of attacks that bypass email filters, only around 10% of malicious payloads are delivered as attachments. And around 90% of the attachments contain deceptive links leading to a further payload, such as malware attacks or credential harvesting. And the other 10% of attachments contain further social engineering with the goal of further engagement from the recipient. Now, this kind of was a little bit counterintuitive to me. So, Maxime, I want to ask you, why do bad actors like malicious attachments, even when they don't always carry the payload? Like, what's with all the complexity?
Yeah. Malicious attachment campaigns, they're a common phishing technique. They have typically a harder time bypassing filters, so that's why they're a bit lower in the percentage of total threats that have malicious attachments. But when they do bypass them, they're more successful. I think that's because attachments arouse curiosity, and to the untrained eye, it can be hard to resist seeing what's inside. So that's really what we see in our training data that you're going to share just next, that click rates are a lot higher on attachment simulations versus link ones.
What's in that package? We all have got to see. It's so exciting to know when there's going to be something mysterious to open up. So yeah, and that's thanks for that. Actually, Maxime, why don't you take it away? What are you seeing with this data?
Yeah.
So I think we have do we have a freeze there? Oh, there we go. Hi, Maxime. Sorry about that.
Yeah, my connection seems to be a bit unstable. Sorry, we're live. I was saying, yeah, the training data reveals on this slide reveals kind of an interesting success story about malicious attachment. We see that click rate is higher in attachment simulations than in other simulations in the beginning, but we also see that therefore after that behavior change is especially pronounced for this type of simulation. So on the first attachment simulation, only 34% of users successfully report an attachment phishing simulation, with quite a large 11% opening the attachment. But after the sixth simulation, the failure rates are sliced by 2.5 times. And after 12 simulations, Hoxhunt sees the report rate increase to 74%, and it even climbs to 80% after 14 simulation. So again, I think that's quite interesting to see that, yes, it's a more effective technique in the beginning, but when we train to that, we see even larger behavior change than for other threats. So maybe it becomes easier to actually see a malicious attachment as a red flag for people.
Yeah, that really shows the power of training, and that's almost immediate dramatic results, and that's just putting those results into into improvements with the 2.35x improvement in success and the improvement in failure rate.
I have a quick question. Just on what time period are the 14 simulations going out? Is this once a week, twice a month, once a month? Like how long of a time period is that?
Do you want to answer, Maxime, or should?
I don't have it readily available. We need to double check because we send simulations typically every other week so that we get the fastest behavior change. But it's not going to be every other week that you get an attachment simulation. You're going to get a link, and then an attachment, and then a credential harvester, and then a QR code, and then something else. So there's actually some delay between the attachment simulations. But I don't know on average if it's every month and a half, 2 months, or 3 months that we can maybe come back later to the participants about this.
Sure, no problem. In my head, I was thinking 14, phishing simulations. I mean, I know depends on the frequency of your, the simulation program. And it's a good point to mention that that's not every simulation. That's only simulations with an attachment. One of our attendees asked, what is meant by a miss? Does that mean that they didn't report it, or that they opened it, or that they clicked? Like, what does that mean?
So success means reporting in our nomenclature, in our terminology. So success means reporting, fail means clicking or opening the attachment here. And miss is anything else when we don't know what the person did. If maybe they read the email and they didn't take any action, maybe they deleted it, maybe they haven't even opened it and they're not using their email inbox. So we measure the clicks basically and the reports, but the miss are the unknowns. We don't know what they've done.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, really, really good questions there too. And also, it's important to know that frequency in general with training is going to have a direct impact on skill acquisition. It's like if you're ever trying to do anything where you're trying to build a skill, whether it's shoot baskets or get better at painting. I mean, the more frequent you practice something, the better you're going to get at it. So that's why the training that Hoxhunt calls adaptive and behavior change training, it is predicated on frequent short bursts of training experiences. So here we're looking at the actual number of fish per industry, and I do want to have a quick disclaimer here. We kind of re-examined the data. One industry that's actually much higher than this, it's actually in the top 5 easily, is retail. And so we're going to update this soon to have that reflected. But when you're calculating how many fish are in the actual email environment, it's hard to do unless you have real good human threat intelligence. By human threat intelligence, that means people who are actually seeing those emails, those phishing emails that get by the filter, and then reporting them. So the number of real reported malicious emails represents only a percentage of the total number of phishing emails that come in. And as many fish are missed and some are clicked on. So the calculation that we basically have here is that you have the total threats per user, is calculated by dividing the real reported threats per user by the industry's success rate. And that's because you're saying that, let's say, and the global average is about a 60%, success rate means reporting rate. So you have a 60% reporting rate. And with the Hoxhunt data set, it's 36 simulations per year. And at that point, you have a pretty strong sense that if you have a 60% reporting rate on 36 simulations per year per user, you have a pretty good confidence that that's about how many fish people are going to report in the entire environment. So from there, with real threat detection rates also being very high, and we're connecting the training data to the real threat detection data, then you can get an estimate of what the total number of fish are based on real threats that are reported. So we're looking at this, and the different industries have different levels of attack. Different industries also have different levels of security maturity, and that's something that's been widely reported on different reports, such as Cofense's report, looking at different industries that are particularly attacked. Verizon and IBM's reports on which industries are particularly costly and hit the most. It typically is health and human services, retail, which I think we'll wait just a moment before we get into that, but Maxime has tremendous knowledge on this himself, having led and directed human risk programs in the retail industry and elsewhere. But there's a lot to look at in this topic. But basically, if you have training, if it's good enough training and it has good enough engagement and behavior-based engagement results, and you can connect that also on the platform to the real threat detection and knowing how many threats people are reporting and getting people to report threats as a habit, then you're going to be able to actually see the danger in your email environment. And yeah. So talking about the power of good training, now we're rounding into the happy ending portion of the story. So the good news is that training works. It makes you better and faster at recognizing and reporting social engineering attacks, be they AI crafted or human written. And what we see is that 2/3 of people who go into Hoxhunt training, 2/3 of them will actually recognize and report a real threat within 1 year of starting training. Now, we talk about being faster. Speed is essential in cybersecurity. At the very end of this, we're going to look at the costs of phishing and of social engineering attacks and how dramatically they are reduced by millions per incident, depending on the speed with which it is reported, recognized, and there's some kind of mitigation efforts. So we can reduce with good training, the time it takes to recognize and report a attack by 1/3. And the fastest 5% of your organization, and this is true across all organizations, there's a certain group of people who are just hardwired to be your lighthouse for threats. They can report threats within 39 seconds of it getting into the environment. They will recognize, read, and click the report button in 39 seconds. And phishing simulation reporting rates soar by 9x in 1 year. Now, Cliff, I just want to do a quick check. How are we doing on time? Are we doing all right?
We have about 10 more minutes scheduled on the webinar, so maybe we could try to wrap up the slides and allow 5 minutes or so for Q&A. So another 5 minutes or so, if that works for you on the slides, and then we'll go to the audience.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's go ahead and do that. And there's also this, if you are interested in, I hope you are, in getting more into this data, the report itself has a lot of important further data and explanation in there that will give you a really good sense of what's going on here. But just building on that idea about behavior change and it being a function of interactions, and behavior-based interactions. I mean, you really see here when you look at the difference between a typical SAT program, a typical security awareness training program that has quarterly phishing simulations, and those are only based on punishment. So that you only get any kind of training when you fail something. So if you happen to see something and fail it, then training is triggered at that point. Whereas if you have a program of behavior change where it's looking at both your behavioral threat reports and everything else, you get a hugely different amount of data from that. So maybe Maxime, you could sort of explain why that's important.
Yeah, I mean, quite quickly, at Hoxhunt, we send 2 to 3 phishing simulations per month to each employee. It might seem a lot, but that's what we found to have the best effect in changing behaviors and people actually reporting being happy about the frequency and even wanting more. And so we reach more than 60% engagement, voluntary engagement on reporting and simulations after 1 year, and close to 80% after a few years. So if you multiply this engagement by more than 2.5 million users in hundreds of organizations over several years of training, that's a lot of data points. So I believe that makes the results from the report I think it's best that you actually go through it. We're going to send the slides and the link after, because there's a lot of data in the upcoming slides. It makes them more robust than any other study I've seen elsewhere. And by the way, we've also contributed with the Verizon Data Breach Investigation report during the past few months. So we've shared all of this data with them, and some of it is going to be included in the next Verizon Data Breach Investigation report that is going to be released in April or May, I believe.
Yeah, thanks. Really excited about that. And the effects of having that approach, behavior-based, frequent approach, and we won't go into the whole Hoxhunt platform, but there's a lot of features to it, but the effects wind up being dramatic. During onboarding alone, which is the period where people are taught how to use a button and what a phishing simulation is, and even like what a phishing attack is, behavior-based engagement soars by over 6 times. Failure rates are cut in half. And that's just with the onboarding. During onboarding, the users are given a simple tool. It's embedded in their email client to report phishing simulations. They learn how to use that tool and how to spot phishing attacks in gamified micro trainings, along with communication from the security awareness manager. So right away, there's a dramatic effect. That effect continues over time as the reporting rates, first they soar, then they continue to go up over time, over periods of years, and their failure rates, where they'll fail a phishing simulation, it goes around 2% eventually over years of training, but never to 0. And that's by design, because the phishing simulations in an AI-powered adaptive phishing program are designed to get more difficult, to challenge users at the edge of their skill levels, to keep them engaged. I wanted to turn this over before we turn it off. I promised earlier that Maxime would talk a little bit about phishing and behaviors by industry. And Maxime, maybe you could just give just a sense of why people's backgrounds there and why certain industries really have an effect on their ability to recognize and report a cyber attack.
These numbers are also quite eye-opening, I would say. And when you see that the financial services industry has a success rate, so report rate over 61% over all of our customers, and retail on the other end is at 30%. There's a lot of things that come into account here. You know, financial services, they've had a security culture since the industry existed, right? Their role is to store and protect money and make money grow. So for forever, it's been, you know, from the carriage transporting money on the roads to today digital vaults, security is extremely important. So it makes sense to see that the culture of security there is great and report rates are great. But we have challenges in pharma and healthcare, in retail, for example, where people have just different priorities. They're not on their computer that often. In retail, the customer always comes first. And in healthcare, you know, you're trying to save lives. So a phishing email, compared to it, not that important. So I think what's important in there is to, of course, acknowledge the environments of where our workforce is and what is their job like, what are their priorities, and make sure that we adjust our interventions to this environment, to their challenges, to their objectives. So that's why, for example, at Hoxhunt, we've actually launched more targeted training. So both security awareness training modules and simulations that are specifically targeted to care providers in healthcare, so the physicians, the nurses, and to in-store staff for retail, people who are in the shop, in the store every day, at the cashier, for example. So we created specific training for them so that we have a higher chance to reach them.
Yeah, great points. So, Cliff, I think we can wrap up here and just looking a little bit at the costs that are associated with phishing and social engineering, and also with having protective measures put in place in the form of training. And we see some really useful data from IBM and the Ponemon Institute here. So many struggle to communicate the value of your program to your decision makers. And Maxime can speak to this more artfully than myself. I've never led a security awareness and human risk program. But you constantly need to demonstrate a return on investment. And with this kind of data, you can do exactly that. You can show how measurable behavior change directly connects to measurable risk reduction. And that in turn does have some numbers in dollars and euros attached to it. So for instance, this slide shows from the 2024 IBM report, there was a cost difference of 1.5 million or 34% in data breaches, depending on how highly skilled or how low skilled their employees were. So high skilled organizations with high skill levels of employee training were hit by 1.5 million less per incident. And this is really good news because the Ponemon Institute just released their much anticipated cost of insider risk report, and that's an update of the famous 2021 cost of phishing study. And the amount of IT security budget allocated to insider risk, which is another way of saying human risks, they divide insider risk as malicious and non-malicious. So it's not just people who are attacking their own companies, but the budget that's gone to the sort of human risk, insider risk, security risk programs has more than doubled from 8.2% in 2023 to 16.5% of the security budget in 2024. And the faster resolution significantly reduced costs. 10.6 million for incidents contained in under 31 days versus 18.7 million for an incident that lasts over 91 days. So that's just some dollars and cents to throw at you. And Maxime, just how do you communicate the value of a program to the decision makers? What do you need to show them?
Typically, I like, that's what I shared at Convene actually, for those who were there. I like to do experiments, right? And to do an intervention just for a subgroup of the organization, try something with them, measure what was the risk before or the behaviors before, do that intervention and measure the result after and compare it to my control group, people who did not receive any intervention. Right? Because if you see that actually by doing, this new intervention in our security awareness program, we increase that behavior by 80%. We reduce the risk by 70%. That's when you can actually show that what you're doing matters, right? The true impact that you're having and potentially get buy-in and even budget to expand the initiative to everyone in the organization or to additional interventions.
A great idea. I love that. This is also really helpful to see too, when you have these statistics that we can share with this community group. And if people haven't heard of this report before, it can be really helpful too, to also help justify asks like that as well. So I love that. Do you guys have anything else really quick before we go into the Q&A? There's not a lot out here. I'm just going to kind of throw it out back to the audience if you guys have any other questions. Anything else we should take away?
The data in the report is also really useful to see how you're doing compared to other peers in your industry. So have a look. We haven't shared all the performance by industry in all details, but have a look also at that. I highly recommend if you want to see how you fare and bring that as an additional element to your leadership if you're doing really good or if you need to improve.
Perfect. Well, we're almost out of time. I'm going to try to run through some of the questions that were asked really quick. Yes, you're going to get a copy of the slides. Yes, we'll provide a link to the report. You answered Jessica's question about what happens when somebody clicks or when they report a test. So yes, they do get, an oops or whatever that is, and then a reward message or good job when you report successfully. So that's great. Let's see. We have somebody asking a quick clarification on AI written data. Are they seeing not so many AI written phishing attacks? I think that's what we saw was it's a smaller percentage than we might think of right now. Like we kind of expect this big flood of AI phishing emails, but from what your research found, it was actually a smaller percentage, right?
Yes, correct. It's
Yeah.
0.7 to 4.7% of phishes in 2024 that were written by AI. So quite a small amount yet. It might be increasing quite fast in the future. We've seen other reports having slightly higher percentages. So I think it's something to monitor, but at the moment it's not the most prevalent amount of emails being written by AI.
And
Exactly.
also just to clarify and really emphasize this, these are the fish that bypass the filters. So the ones
Yes.
that actually get past the filters. So there's a huge burst in volume, total volume that get hit by the filters. And I can't exactly speak to how much that is. And again, I think the Mimecast data was 12% of those were written by AI. Still quite a bit less than you would think, than I would have thought. And this data is just coming in there. And like Maxime alluded to earlier, the tools that are out there for analyzing hundreds of thousands or millions of these attacks, they're still developing, they're still evolving, they're still getting better. So this is quite conservative estimates now. Maybe it is more than this, a little bit more than this, or much more. But this is our best ability to estimate now.
Got it. Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for taking the time. This has been a fantastic presentation. Lots to think about, lots of takeaways here. Um, I think the audience had some great interaction, great questions, and really great to see you guys at Convene, and we appreciate your support. I'll follow up with everyone on the call with our follow-up email, which will include the recording link, the slides, the download for this report, and ways to contact Maxime and Eliot if you guys would like to do that to continue this conversation. So thank you so much once again. We will go ahead and wrap this up, and we'll look forward to speaking with everyone again next month during our AI April campaign. So stay on the lookout for that from NCA, and thank you so much again to Hoxhunt for partnership.
Thanks for having us. Thanks everyone for joining.
All right. Have a great day. Thank you guys.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.